Hi, I'm Tracy Chi. I'm the author of We Are Not Free, a novel and stories about the Japanese-American incarceration in World War II. I have a deep family connection to this history because my family was also imprisoned during this time. They spent the years from 1942 to 1945 in camps behind barbed wire with more than 100,000 other people of Japanese ancestry. In researching what happened to them, I've been lucky enough to interview them, read their diaries and memoirs, and pick through their photo albums, discovering so many amazing stories about these people I knew only as grandparents and great aunts and uncles. And I'm so excited to share some of these stories with you. I'd like to start this time by telling you about one amazing find, my grandma's old steamer trunk in my aunt's garage. Grandma was 13 when she was sent into the camps, so she spent some of her most formative teenage years behind barbed wire fences, and she kept everything. Yearbooks, photos, dance cards, newspaper clippings, old dried up corsages, I mean everything, including dozens upon dozens of letters, most of them from my grandpa. Now, for a little historical context, by 1945, 3 years after more than 100,000 Japanese Americans were evicted from their homes and shipped off to incarceration camps in the American interior, a lot of things had changed. D-Day had happened a year before, the all-Japanese American 442nd Regimental Combat Team had proven themselves again and again on the battlefields of Europe, and young Japanese American men were now being drafted into military service. Like my grandpa. Grandpa was drafted into the Army in spring of 1945. And his first letter to my grandma came right after he left for basic training. In it, he talks about how he hopes his kid brother, my great uncle Mick, delivered some chocolates to her as a thank you for some sort of party she'd thrown to see him off. And I'm reading this letter and I'm laughing because he keeps insisting that the chocolates mean nothing. They're just friends. But over the next couple months, he keeps writing her, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. He writes her so much that he gets in trouble with his sergeant for writing after the lights go out. And all the while, he just keeps insisting that they're just friends. He even signs his letters, just Pete. But then there are all these little changes. Like after he hears from his buddy that green ink means love, he changes his ink to, you guessed it, green. And then he starts signing his letters, always Pete. And finally, after months of this, he finally admits, it's like this, Margaret. I like you awfully lot. And it is just the best thing. It's like I got to watch my grandparents fall in love. Of course, none of this made it into We Are Not Free, which is fiction. Although there is this huge emphasis now on the letters and postcards the characters write to one another once they begin to come apart at the seams. But I never would have gotten the chance to witness the beginning of my grandparents' love story if I hadn't gone digging through my grandma's trunk, if I hadn't had it in me to write We Are Not Free. And that makes this book infinitely more precious to me. Normally, I like to include some resources on the incarceration here, but this time, I'd like to encourage you to make some research stories of your own. Ask someone important to you about their life story. Sit down with them over a hot beverage and see what they'd like to tell you about who they were when they were young and what the world was like back then. Or you can write someone a letter. Write something to a person you care about. Write something from the heart. Give them a reason to keep your letter around in a shoebox or a steamer trunk. So maybe one day, down the line, someone else will find it and know just how much that person was loved.